Semester number 1, lesson number 33. Our aim today is how did President Lincoln broaden the powers of the presidency? And to start off, I want you to read and annotate the first 6 paragraphs of Lincoln's inaugural speech and answer the following question. What was Lincoln saying about slavery in his inaugural address? And we will talk more about that tomorrow in class, and we'll be reading that. All right. Today, when we're talking about the Civil War, we're going to talk about Lincoln's goals for preserving the Union and the broadening of executive power. All right. And we're going to start off by looking at Lincoln's policy. While he opposed secession, Lincoln did not want to start the fighting. All right. He waited until military action was taken by the South. So the first shot was taken by the South. The South seizes Fort Sumter, and Lincoln sends in troops, which is the beginning of the Civil War. So Lincoln did not, even though he had the problem with secession, he did not want to throw the first punch. And the South ends up doing so, and that's when the war begins. Key phrase that we need to make sure we understand is preservation of the Union. Right? The South believed that it had the right to leave the Union, that it had the right to become its own country, the Confederate States of America. And they feel that they had that right because the U.S. had not protected Southern rights, and therefore they were in disagreement over that, and they felt like their constitutional rights had been taken away. All right. The North and Lincoln believed that states could not leave the Union. He believed it was in the best interest of the country to fight to keep the United States as one country. All right. Lincoln believed that it was a country of people, not of states, right? And therefore, no state had the right to leave the Union. And he felt that it was still one country, although the South said they were their own country. So during the war, Lincoln had pretty specific aims and did some very interesting things to show the power of the presidency. All right, he had one goal and one goal only, and that goal was to preserve the Union, keep the Union together. Slavery was a secondary thought and one that was less on his mind than keeping the Union together, which was definitely the most important goal. All right. When Congress was not in session, Lincoln took this opportunity to take some presidential powers among himself. He increased the size of the Navy. He increased the military spending, the amount of money spent on the military. He arrested pro-South people living in Maryland and Delaware to make sure they did not secede. Maryland and Delaware were 2 states that did not take a side, and to ensure that people did not convince that state to go to the South, Lincoln arrested all people who were protesting that were for the South, that were pro-South, and he suspended habeas corpus. That's a pretty big deal, right? During the war, he suspends people's rights to see a judge within 48 hours. And a lot of people are thrown in jail and kept in jail until the war is over so that they don't cause trouble. All right. And that's a pretty important, thing when you talk about constitutional rights. It is the right of somebody, of the accused to see a judge within 48 hours. And Lincoln felt like the country was in danger and he had the right to go against that right because it was for the best interest of the country. And he also implemented martial law, which arrested thousands that he believed were disloyal. All right, and martial law is putting the military in more of a policing patrol kind of role. During the war, Lincoln broadened the powers of the executive branch. We're going to talk about a few presidents this year that broadened the powers. We already talked about Andrew Jackson. All right, we're talking about Lincoln here. We're going to talk about Teddy Roosevelt. We're going to talk about Franklin Roosevelt, among some others. These are presidents who took the opportunity and made the presidency much more powerful. Lincoln's actions as president were questioned, especially obviously by those in the South, and many believed Lincoln overstepped his constitutional boundaries as president. They believed a lot of the things he did were not within the rights of the president, including the suspension of martial law. The suspension of habeas corpus, and the implementing of martial law. And a lot of people claim that this was taking away the civil rights of the individuals, which is true. But Lincoln's argument was the most important thing is the safety of the people in the country. And if taking a few people's rights away gave them that safety, then he was willing to do that. Then we'll look at some of your questions from last night. And we have 2 check for understandings today. The first one, in his inaugural address, President Abraham Lincoln stated his main goal for the nation was to A, use the vote to resolve the conflict over slavery, B, free all slaves in the United States, C, uphold the Dred Scott decision, or D, preserve the Union? And we'll go over that tomorrow. And the second one is a quote. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. This provision is evidence that the writers of the Constitution A. wanted the President to have unlimited power during wartime, B. wanted to balance individual liberty with the needs of the nation, C. did not trust the common people to obey laws, or D. expected the American people to oppose most government policies. Now, this is a tricky one, but you really need to think about is this quote says that in certain times it's okay to suspend the right of habeas corpus, the writ of habeas corpus, right? What does that say about balance? What does that say about, what we are really looking for as a government? Obviously, it's always to make sure the people have their rights, but what else are we looking to make sure we have? And we'll go over that tomorrow in class. Your work today you're gonna scan and annotate a paper comparing the suspension of habeas corpus by President Lincoln and by President George Bush. All right, so you're gonna compare the president from 1861 to the president in 2001, which it's 140 years difference, but they were very some similarities and some differences. And you're going to complete a Venn diagram, which will find the similarities and differences in their situations, and you'll answer the following questions in your notebook. How were Lincoln and Bush's situations similar, and how were they different? Was either president justified in suspending habeas corpus? Explain using evidence from the text. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Have a good night.